like huddled together, holding his paws, just staring at me.
All I want right now is for that not to be real and for you just to be hallucinating to make my point. That's all I want.
That's part of the reason why I've never been interested in doing drugs a little bit. Like I'm curious in a lot of things with the high openness, but I'm not that interested. I'm like my general waking state is borderline hallucination.
I just have to let you know, Luke, that I'm now streaming this to my channel. So you've actually made it to my channel. But
that's so nice.
The reason I'm doing it is
the only thing streamed is him talking about a squirrel. It's even better.
Yeah, for sure. Hezi, I'm trying to add you, but I don't know. There's no video.
But Dave Busatil's point, I think, really connected with me in terms of
course,
I sort of immediately connected it with Gnosticism. That there's sort of a correlation between a psychedelic perspective and a Gnostic perspective, because I mean psychedelics are quite connected, let's say, to dream states. And the irony about dream states is they are not connected to our, I mean, we are physically immobilized and cut off from a lot of sense perception in dreaming.
So yeah, but like even that, I'm gonna try to shut up and let other people talk a bunch. But even that, like a dream, that is, you're cut off from the five senses, sense perception. But you could say the same thing about psychedelics. Is that all illusion? Is that all not real? Are dreams not real?
Well,
I don't think you're gonna go there.
I wouldn't say they're not real. That's way too categorical. But figuring out their unrealness is important.
For me, I believe dreams and psychedelics are a form of death, and that there's a kind of death that is regenerative, resurrective death, and there's a kind of death that leads to the second death, right? And I would connect that even with fasting as well, right? Even the way that we understand some psychedelics to work is that in some situations, it's not that it turns on parts of your brain. It sometimes turns off the parts of your brain that dysregulate. So it actually is killing part of you. And that death is actually the thing that brings things forward.
Well, Matthew Peugeot's, his most recent long video, talked a lot about sleep and death. And I thought that was really helpful and perceptive.
It's all about renewal.
Yeah, it's sort of a twin side there.
In the Talmud, we say that a 1/60th of a dream is considered prophecy. And when we wake up every morning, we say, "Thank you, God, for returning my soul." And there's a sense where, the reality we see in front of us is actually, well, not the reality, what we see in front of us day to day when we are conscious, that potentially is the facade. And when we sleep, when we allow it in the subconscious, sort of in the tohu vavohu, there could be new creations that could be happening there once you start playing with these things without any rules, right? Like sort of in I'm just borrowing a term, but when a superposition, when I'm looking at it, right, then that observation is happening. But when before I observe it, though, it could be either or. And I think that either or space does allow for the initiated or one that's properly oriented to then start making shape of the things he's seeing.
Yes, this is where we need Steven to come in here and talk about. I was recently talking to Steven D20, who's he's in a series of 3 chats on Christian Baxter's channel, but he's in the chats here somewhere. And we were talking about a little privately about Joe Rogan's conversation with, who's the physicist, Brian Cox, and they were talking about black holes. And black holes, there's a 10-minute clip where they talk about black holes and this renewed interest in black holes, because we don't really know what happens across black holes. It's an information death. The bottom line is, like he was saying, we could be sitting in this room having this conversation and cross an event horizon, and for us nothing could change, but from the outside it would be black, nothing, there's no information getting past. Well, I've been thinking about black holes and death and information and knowing and what all those things mean. It's fascinating stuff.
I'm as people know, I have this ridiculous mustache because I'm in the middle of a play. And about 2 weeks before the show, I started getting nervous and I started having dreams of the play, right? And I can't remember where they did a study on it, where they found that people who had dreams about whatever they were trying to process those things faster. So I think it was related to, if I have it right, it was people who know how to lucid dream who are in a study of how quickly they could solve the puzzles faster if they did them in their dreams as well. Which is interesting because when I was in the dream state, if it came to, okay, say a line from the show, I couldn't say any individual line of the play. It's like the idea of the play was there, but nothing specific. I couldn't pull out any specific line and say it. It was like the sensation of it.
There's that one study with basketball players where they have like one group that goes and shoots free throws for an hour a day or whatever it was. And then they had a second group that only visualized doing the free throws for an hour a day. And then I forget how long it went on, but anyway, came back and the people doing the visualization actually outperformed were improved at a better rate than the ones who were just going and doing the actual shooting the free throws.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. It was a slight increase, but it was noticeable.
Well, that gets into Polyani, which I know Luke loves. I'm trying to give you the stage here, Luke. I'm trying to give you the stage. I know you've been frustrated by not having the big stage, and there Jess got some talk time. So,
No, what's funny, this has been helpful for me. It's why, like, is it good or bad? It's the Chinese farmer. Because it's funny, because like Esther Meat comes on, and you talk about Polanyi. I'm pretty sure I'm the first one in the corner to talk about Esther Meek and Polanyi. I used to talk about Polanyi all the time and subsidiary focal integration. And then Esther Meek is on. But here's the thing that's good about it. It's good. Do I really believe in personal relational ontology and that do I really care about the truth of things being expanded, or do I care that I'm acknowledged that I am the one who gave it? Like, is it really about my ego, or is it really about just people living into the reality of the truth? Well, I think a lot of times I care more about my ego. So I'm glad that you don't highlight me. Don't highlight me. Clip David. It's good.
Okay, sorry, just because T-Grog's thing is up right now. Oh, and so you threw it away.
Sorry, I'll put it back. I like that one. It's basically Origin.
So this is the thing about psychedelic experiences. Again, it's people used to think that when you did something like DMT, that it was artificially turning on the parts of your brain that see things. It's not the case. Psychedelics actually turn off the parts of your brain that are constantly interacting with each other. They kill you a little. And people who have near-death experiences don't see black. That's not what happens as your brain turns off. As you die, you see more things and experience more things, not less.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. It's like your focal awareness in general. Like when Peterson talks about even vision, most of it's inhibitory. It's shutting things off so that you can see.
Yeah, your brain is just like shut up left side, shut up right side. Like it's constantly doing that.
Yeah. Miguel Chris makes the same point.
I think Jordan Peterson once said that when you're walking down the street, basically, your mind is actually rendering things for you. Like, you're not actually seeing the buildings. It's just your mind telling you buildings are here and showing you a pattern. It's not actually what you're seeing. But I don't think we could ignore the fact that the pineal gland itself, produces this type of chemical in your brain, and that whether it's the third eye or whether it's the phylacteries that are sitting on the location of the third eye, there are many references that are alluding to something deeper, something within that allows you to see without seeing.
Well, and that is the bad trip. Like, the source of the bad trip is that constantly you are denying things within yourself. And when you start taking psychedelics, you're unable, like, instead of having this in this closet that you've shut, that you aren't opening and aren't examining, psychedelics means you aren't able to keep that door shut. Right? And for some people,
Right.
that's the unprocessed.
Sam Harris calls this, I think in his book Waking Up, he calls it facing, like, a bad trip is facing the mountain of shame. And that to me always sounded like something that we all should go through.
Bas Van Os wrote, I don't know if, because the comments don't necessarily go all the way over, so I don't know that Luke saw this, but he said,
I'll
Lucas
highlight it.
used ayahuasca and had these intense experiences. We picked him up and he spoke about his experiences. The next day I asked him to read the Gnostic Gospel of Philip and he had to cry. So, on my channel, I made the connection between psychedelics and Gnosticism based on David's point. But yeah, it's super interesting. By the way, this is my last day with the dog. We turn her in tomorrow, and she goes to be a working dog. Miss my baby.
It's going to be sad.
Why do you do that to yourself?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's great. I think it's
These
great that you
dogs
did that,
are
Pastor Paul.
amazing. What's that?
I said I think it's great that you did that, and the sense that there's a part of the natural world, and we see this the most with food, which is when we eat food, in a certain sense, we're elevating those particles themselves into our spirit, right? We're allowing the food itself to nurture us and to turn us as humans or as God-fearing people, and to elevate the food itself. So even with the natural world and with animals, taking an animal and nurturing it, creating a relationship with it, and then to allow it to then ascend and service a human in a certain sense is really upgrading the animal. So I think it's a tremendous privilege to do so.
There's this really good animation of it. There's no dialogue in it, and it's about Adam in the garden, and then so it's him like in the garden, and you see him like exploring and all this stuff, and then he meets Eve through it, and it's, I don't know, just all the subtleties in the animation make it very like vivid and also really great. But then they eat the fruit at the end. It's like a short. It's like 10 and 15 minutes long or something. And then, but Adam had befriended a dog in his explorations and all this stuff. He's like leaping around and like doing like Rafe Kelly stuff. And anyway, they eat the fruit and then they're cast out. There's this huge storm, lightning strikes, and they're like they're full of fear for the first time, and like they're running out of the garden into the fields and off into the unknown. And the dog is standing there like at the edge of the forest of the garden and the field and watching them go. And like at the very end, the dog's like deciding what he's going to do. He's like looking back and forth, and then he runs after to go with Adam and Eve. And I'm just like, I'm like crying. And that's how it ends, is this like relationship with the dogs and us.
That's beautiful. All
right, I gotta go. I'll see you guys.
All right. For those just catching it on Twitter and YouTube, this is a live stream by Luke. Luke Thompson is one of the most important people in the corner, and he streams on his own channel, Luke Thompson, although it's terribly hard to find because his name isn't unique, and Grail Country, which is a little easier to find in a big channel. And I've come to believe that basically what I've done on the internet is cultivated a sphere of extended cognition that includes these people. And Luke is a very important part of that network. And so I want everyone to see Luke and to appreciate him, because there's a little Luke inside that just doesn't feel seen or heard. So I just had to say that.
This won't help. But thank you. I appreciate that, Paul. Also, I like, it's part of your whole thing that I'm following in the pattern of. It's the slow growth thing. Most people aren't going to like anything that I have to say. It's not even going to be intelligible to them. So yeah, don't come and sign up because you'll hate it.
And subscribing is pointless on YouTube. If you haven't figured out that little subscribe button, it says some things, but it doesn't say anything that you think it should. Oh, not in the pool.
Yeah. And that's kind of to something you've said a lot, that in TLC we're using YouTube almost against itself. That really is the TLC thing. You trust the algorithm a little bit, and I mainly just check my prescriptions. Really, if I'm on YouTube, I'm basically watching corner content. I watch almost nothing else except comedy or like mild entertainment, like food shorts or something. Stuff about cars, maybe. But like information that I need for some particular use. Yeah.
So David, I want to know, following up on your comment about psychedelics and death and sleep and my connection with Gnosticism, how does YouTube fit into this? Because it is different from the sort of curated content that you'll see on Netflix or Amazon, because this is user generated content. So I've continued to sort of wonder when Amazon is going to try to rival YouTube, because I think over the long run, YouTube is going to destroy all of the other streaming services.
Yeah. So immediately what jumps out at me is, I think it was something I got from Brett Weinstein, where he was talking about color blindness and camouflage detection. You know what I'm talking about?
Uh-huh.
Is it during World War II, you'd take people who are colorblind and they would be placed to view from airplanes because they could detect camouflage better than people who saw in color. The color would be and I actually, a friend of mine had this experience. I'm Canadian, so our money is ridiculously colored. And a guy was biking with his dad, and it was in the fall, and all the leaves had changed colors, and all of a sudden his dad hits the brakes hard and picks a $50 bill up off the ground from a leaf pile, because that's the color that a $50 bill is in Canada. It's like the color of changing leaves. The sun couldn't see them because the color similarity made him was able to distract him. But the one with less information, the one whose senses were actually more dead, could see more detail. And you've talked about this, Paul, about the churn and about interaction. I very much agree with the point where there's interaction with these things. There's interaction on YouTube videos that are important the way that they aren't on Netflix. So that relationship is what makes it able to bring forward more important details. Because it's like we hit the point where there's too much to see. People talk about that for Netflix too. There's too much to watch. What am I going to watch? What is relevant? And relevance realization is killing everything. It is death. And YouTube gives a sense of relevance realization that I think Netflix doesn't. Yeah, absolutely. It's death again, Jason. Yeah. It's death again, not fasting. Fasting is a form of death, not the other way around.
And that strikes me, you know, what Luke just said, because I got to keep pointing to Luke. Sorry, Luke.
Yeah.
What Luke just said, I've noticed the same thing. So I get up this morning, and of course, I'm doing a whole bunch of things, and then it's my wife goes to work, and it's time to empty the dishwasher and exercise the dog, and do some of these things. And YouTube has so much content there for me, but because Luke is streaming, it's like that's it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to pare all this down and hear about how Luke is a boy toy for his wife, and it's just bang right there.
That's okay. Luke, don't be insulted by this, okay? I have to say something that I don't mean is insulting. The beginning of your videos, I really like talking to you. I sometimes have no idea what the hell you're getting at the beginning of your video. Okay? And I will be on YouTube watching something I fully understand and I'm getting and I'm like energized by, and I will turn that off to listen to you confuse me because I plan on engaging with you. And I get so much out of the engagement and what you're like, where you guide the conversation, that I don't get out of a video that whatever. I honestly, I don't mean that as an insult.
No,
You know
it's not. It's not. Okay, here's the thing. So I think next, I was going to say this to you. I said it in a comment. I don't know if you saw this, but so the Midwest touring next year, I'm planning on being there. I think my whole family's going to go, actually. They're not all going to go to the conference, but they're all going to come to Chicago. And Sherry, God bless you. I think this is fantastic.
Sherry, thank you. I'm very proud of that joke.
I don't even think she's kidding. But I think part of that, like when I was saying earlier that I don't need psychedelics, I'm not kidding. I think I'm basically there most of the time. I think that I am seeing connections all over the place that I think are unintelligible to most people. I think that's really true. And it's no different. I mean, I'm very used to it. My wife has no idea what I'm talking about. Whenever I talk about the stuff, we don't talk about this stuff. But nobody does. It's very rare. Jess, there's a few people. Jess, I think, knows what I'm talking about. Sherry knows what I'm talking about most of the time. It's uncommon. But one of the things is, this is part of the reason, though, this is the last thing I'll say, that I like fiction versus nonfiction. It's like reading Faulkner or reading Lilith or reading Loris or something, or like reading this book. If you try to come to this book and read it in a left-brained analytical way, you won't be able to read it. You'll give up. You have to just participate in it and let it wash over you. It's like everybody saying, when Peugeot started talking, nobody knew what he was talking about. You started to know what he was talking about through participation.
Oh, yeah. That goes exactly to the book you sent me, Luke.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's participating. The only way to understand. It's the book that the movie Signal. Is that the movie name? Signal.
No. What is the dumb movie? The one with the aliens and coming down. Arrival. Yes.
Arrival. Yeah. And how like you can't build a language if you don't have a common reference point. But if I can jump in on something David was just talking about, which is he was talking about the turning on and off parts of your your perception or knowledge, and like in terms of if you are colorblind, that's a skill by itself. Having less information is actually a benefit.
Yep.
And talking about, well, that immediately just creates the meta of, oh, well, I would just, in the future, we'll have brains that can turn on and off context dependently. But it's like, that just creates another realm of wisdom to be, because you can have colorblind people and not colorblind people today, but in the future it'd be like, oh, we can just engineer people to turn on and off their colorblindness.
Right.
But it's like that takes another form of relationships with, you have to have the wisdom to know when to turn on and off your colorblindness. And I don't know if I don't know what the thesis I'm getting at is, but it's funny, just today I was talking to my dad about, I'm just throwing it out there of like moving to Tennessee and just like, that might be a good place and could see some good things coming out of that. And it's funny because he's like, well, Alan, you already have this church community. Like, you're already doing the thing that you say that you want to go to Tennessee to help you with. But I'm like, but I didn't get where I am now by locking in where I was previously. Like, if I had locked into where I was 5 years ago, I wouldn't be the person I am now and have the beliefs and parameters that I have now that I'm trying to optimize. And those parameters will change again in the next 5 years. So there's a wisdom to, and I know my dad's doing this in a loving way, so I don't mean to, like, he wants me to be near him, and we all live in, the Northeast right now. But it's like this idea of like, well, just lock in and optimize where you are. You have a great church. You have all these things you want. You have them right now, and just optimize. I'm like, yeah, but the following of that spirit that got me where I am now took all the changes, took me being open to changing and becoming more wise to where I am now. Yeah. So like, I know this is loose, but it's just this idea of like, you have to develop, it's not just, oh, you'll have a brain that can be colorblind or not colorblind. It's you developing the wisdom to know when to be colorblind and when not to be colorblind. And that's just as important as the skill itself, just as important as seeing colors and not seeing colors. But
I think there's so much to what you're saying. And Jan God just made a comment that's connected with what you're saying, is hitting me with a bunch of ideas where now we have noise canceling headphones because people can't, like, they're unable to focus with the noises going on. Right. And we now have glasses that filter out forms of light. It's, again, exactly what you're saying. We're creating means of death, means of fasting. And you'll see women will, like, especially women on my social media feed, will say, I'm going off social media, right? What they're saying is, I'm too distracted. If I have all these things on at once, it's too much. I'm spread too thin, and I'm not able to be healthy and to focus and to grow. And I'm relating all of this to the day of the Lord, which Paul has been talking about a bit recently. And in my mind, the day of the Lord, if you're talking in Jewish context, the day is Yom Kippur. So the day of the Lord, I think, is connected to Yom Kippur. That this is a much longer conversation, which I won't get into. But it's a day of fasting, a day where you afflict yourself. And it's also the day that atonement occurs. And it's also the day that you announce the freedom of all the slaves in the year of Jubilee. The year of Jubilee was announced at the end of the day of fasting, of affliction. You afflict, but the purpose of the affliction is like a friend of mine right now is getting chemotherapy. Chemotherapy and radiation is fire and disease. It kills you with the belief that the thing that it doesn't kill is the part of you that lives on and is healthy. You kill the bad, you don't kill the good, right? But all of my friend is experiencing the chemotherapy. All of my, right? Like, you don't get to pick. You take in all of this stuff, and it's like the book of Revelation. You afflict, you kill, but the purpose is resurrection. The purpose is the thing that it doesn't kill.
Yeah, but I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
But the point I'd like to add to that is you have to know you get a doctor to tell you when to use chemotherapy. You don't just say like, oh, I'm going to take my chemotherapy pill this morning. It's like, Why is your hair falling
Right.
out and your teeth falling out? It's like, oh, well, I just take a little chemotherapy every, yeah. PVK, if you had more
Yeah.
wisdom, you'd have more hair. The Lord counts the number of hairs on your head, and you've made his job very easy, PVK. But yeah, sorry, just that point of like, yeah, the death. But if you want to integrate more, you also need to know when to die a little, like and when to not die a little, when to grow and when to reap.
But that's part of the liturgical faith too, is Yom Kippur is once a year. It's like, whatever you're doing, I don't care what you're going through right now, you must at least die once a year. You got to at least fast that one day. Paul, what are your thoughts on some of that stuff? Because I was kind of with the Day of the Lord bits that you've been talking about, trying to connect with that.
No, I think you're right. And, one of the things that I've thought about a lot with respect to the Day of the Lord, that it's always scalable. It's always scaling, because the Day of the Lord comes to Israel with the destruction of the temple. It comes to Israel with the destruction both times. But life is sort of this pre-echo of the Day of the Lord, and life is also sort of a pre-echo of death. What do I mean by a pre-echo? I mean, with an echo, you go into a cave, you clap your hand, and you hear it reverberate in diminishing measures. But what happens with eschatology is that history is reversed. We are pulled into the future. And so all of this, both carnage and release, is sort of the same thing. And, one of the things that I made that little membership video, $3 a month membership's not a lot to ask for, a little grift there. $7 for no ads, get to see Peugeot and Vervaeke right away. Noticing again just the lamentations out in the world over the election of Trump again. It's just revelatory. And just in terms of these are people having existential crises over this. And so for a lot of people, the re-election of Donald Trump is the Day of the Lord. And again, that goes both ways. Other people are, couldn't be happier. And I think, David, your connection with death is vital, because the Day of the Lord as death, or as a death, or as death of a world, or as death of an envisioned world. I mean, that's the most common manifestation of the Day of the Lord, that we all have it and we all know it. And for years I've said, the Day of the Lord is when the police officer comes to your door and says there's been an accident, or when the doctor comes to you and says you have cancer, or when your boss comes to you and says you're no longer needed here. And then connecting it, I think, to what's going on with psychedelics, and then connecting that psychedelic thing now with there's a great video that I discovered after I made the video that I released this morning with David Brooks and James Davison Hunter. And of course, you have all this digital fasting going on, and you have Jonathan Haidt, and you have Andy Crouch, who's written a lot on this. And so, you have an hour of fasting every day. You have a day of fasting every week. You have a digital fasting. You have a month of digital fasting every year. And again, I think, these things are sort of lining up for us. And I never was able to sort of put psychedelics into that series, but your observation just made it click for me, because, and also the fact that we just mentioned that McGill, Kristen Peterson, and others have both made the comment that we think, I think in the modern world, we see our brains as an access point to the real world. And so I'm sitting outside. I've got my dog right here. I've got beautiful trees that are finally changing colors here in Sacramento. And I think I'm not going to see these things without my brain and my eyes and so on and so forth. But, they sort of reverse it and note that actually what we do as a brain is filter. And that then connected with your observation, David, that the question of what exactly we are doing here, and the need of this filter, because the irony also with the internet is all of this machinery that you have to connect up to the internet. You know, obviously you have the Wi-Fi signal, you have the router, you have all of this, but so much of this browser software is a filter, because if that's what IP packets are, it takes all of this stuff and makes it into tiny little components. And again, we tend to think of it as access, but this is one of the things that I learned years ago, and I was trying to get my mind around search engines. What are search engines? Search engines are filters. They're not my dog fetching so much. They're filtering this mass. And so it's very much a reversal of a lot of assumptions.
And this is a problem that people have with both capitalism and with algorithms, is that they reveal what people want. That's the biggest problem. Capitalism is great if you're moral. Democracy is great if you're moral, right? And what YouTube is going to recommend to you, if you are a deeply moral person, is going to be more and more of that, right? The filter will get better and give you things that are very interesting and very uplifting. But if you are distracted by your lower nature, that's a simple way of saying that, then, I mean, even the language we use is getting turned on, right? If you're turned on by too many things, right, the algorithm is going to feed you that.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be dead enough. You're going to be too turned on.
And that gets into the sacred. So, you know, the reason I initiated that conversation with Vervaeke and Peugeot was I implicitly, when I listen to people in excitement talking about the sacred, they think it's going to be the Disneyland filters, and Disneyland is a certain kind of filter. And part of the reason I really wanted Peugeot in there was exactly what he did in that clip I posted last night, which is that Peugeot's immediately going to see and very well articulate that, exactly what C.S. Lewis articulates, until we have faces, that holy places are dark places because they're filters. And so you're going to get this question of holiness, which is, and again, the Hebrew scriptures are all over this. It's terrifying. I mean, Moses asks for access, and the Lord says, what you're going to need is a filter. In order for you to have the part from me that you want from me, I'm going to put you in the cleft of the rock, and I'm going to walk behind you, or again, that's really tricky. And I'm going to announce my name. And of course,
we are Christians, and everyone here is. I'm sorry, Chezi, but there's an idea that in order for God to communicate to us, it must be the Lamb who dies before the foundations of the world. In order for God to be for him to be experienced, he can't be infinite. I can't experience the infinite. I can only experience the finite. So in Judaism, there's an idea that there's a contraction that occurs by God in order for him to create the world, right? It needs to be one thing instead of everything. It needs to be one place instead of no place, right? And so in order for God to even interact with us, the only God that we can interact with is the God that dies a little.
Yeah.
But don't you think that
necessary.
everything is present in all things? This is everything in a grain of sand.
No, well, okay. I mean, to some extent, but there also must be distinction.
That's the distinction without division.
I don't know if I would say not division.
I am going to turn off here, and when I turn off, my world, my little filter into the world to my channel and to Twitter turns off. But
Oh no! Oh no! Everyone, quick, like and subscribe at my channel.
So
Please.
here, if you want to continue or you want to jump into the conversation or if you want to continue to watch the conversation,
You don't.
either go to Grail Country or Luke Thompson. All right, Luke is now worried because you're exactly right to worry, Luke, because once you take the level up, it's like, oh, the filter isn't working so good. And now I have to. So, yes, so that's so, yep, for a bunch of you, the stream is going to end, but go to Grail Country or Luke Thompson and you can continue the conversation. Carry on. Sorry to interrupt. I will follow watching.
The
Right.
the that limiting, it just reminded me of what PVK has been saying with Dawkins bringing up the moon landing all the time, of like he's trying to create this like unlimited thing that we can all agree is like a miracle, or not, you know, he wouldn't use that language, but is like a revelation of power. It's like if you use science, you get to go to the moon, and that proves it. But he's just doing that. Sorry, continue.
There's a bit that came to me yesterday, which is going to the moon is ascending. If you used ancient wording, is ascending into heaven. What is the thing that he uses as an example of how great science is that it can help us ascend into heaven.
Yeah. But it's the materialist.
What are we talking
like
about?
It's of course the materials, but ironically, if you were a materialist, it would say, you would just actually say, well, who cares? Like, where's the value? Where
right.
You know, like, okay, these
the
molecules,
moon is dead. There's nothing on the moon, and we can't survive there.
Yeah, and also the atoms we are made up of are dead. So it's like, you know, consciousness is just an emanation from, you know, the molecules. So it's like, there's no place to say that was good. There's no place from which you can say, oh, it's good that we went to the moon. But of course, he's picking that because in his like metaphysics, it's like expressing power through science is good. Expressing like some sort of accomplishment, something you couldn't do previously, use science and then make it achievable, and then doing that to the like highest degree, to the you know, the hardest problem, that's a proof of goodness. And it's like, yeah, you're just re-expressing ascending into heaven, you know, like you're just re-expressing bringing heaven to earth and earth to heaven, you know.
Space isn't heaven, okay? Because out in space, it's actually infinite worlds of possibility. Oh, wait, okay. Right? It's like, what language can we use of space before it starts sounding like heaven again? Right?
Yeah.
It's infinite, always expanding, all this stuff.
So I'm gonna jump in here real quick to kind of, because I was hearing you guys' conversation earlier, and I thought it was very interesting. And the thing about science is that even though it's, for some people it's the all be all to reality, it's still very limited, and it's been growing. And there's a lot of stuff we didn't even know existed, like viruses, and sound is invisible, but we can record it. That's something that we wouldn't able to do, you know, recording a photograph. That's, you know, go back 400 years ago, photographs didn't exist. How do you capture reality? You know what I mean? You can capture somebody that has passed away, but in a photograph, you know, you can see what they look like. But what I'm saying, this is science that didn't exist, but now exists. But the scientists think that they know all there is to know. And they're like, I know everything. It's like, do you really? And so I'm going to say this as far as what Paul was saying about in Christianity, you know, you guys were talking about filters and seeing things differently. You guys mentioned dream world, how that's a little bit different. So the echo in reverse, how we're pulled not we're pulled into the future, and that's it's a ridiculous notion to us that can't travel from the future to the past, to the past to the future, because we're limited. It's just because we're limited, just like science was limited and didn't know viruses and that you could record sound. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And the entity that's outside of physics knows of a world far more different than ours. And like I said, going back to the scriptures, when they in the Old Testament, when it mentions that, if praise that God allows this other person to see what this person sees, and he sees the angels. So there's a world we don't see that exists, but doesn't exist. So I'm going to pin it here and I'm going to try to see if I can merge these notions. Nathan Jacobs was mentioning, he's mentioning about the nominal and about the how the ghosts, and for the Halloween, October, he mentioned weird ideas in history or thoughts. So the story of Emily Rose is based on a real story, and I saw the movie a long time ago, before I started working in a psychiatric hospital. So when I heard the story, it felt different to me. So I started looking into it, and long story short, this lady was treated in a mental hospital by psychiatrists with the medicine of the day, with antipsychotics and antidepressants, and she was treated for like 5 years, I believe, and they weren't able to help her. And that's when they, because they were, there was no hope. That's when they brought in the exorcist, and the exorcist at times didn't want to engage. But long story short, the mystery, in my opinion, of that story is that psychiatry and modern medicine at that time couldn't help her, and the religious folk couldn't help her either, because she ended up dying. And as a matter of fact, they tried to they brought charges against the priests. So to tie this together, as far as the things that exist yet we can't see, just like viruses, we couldn't see the bacteria, but now we kind of, with new technology, we can see it. Before we couldn't record sound, even though it's invisible, but you can actually record it, which is crazy, right? This stream is going out to multiple places at once through an invisible. Don't ask me how this all works. I couldn't explain these technologies to somebody that lived 800 years ago. First of all, 800 years ago, America didn't even exist. So, like I said, the pace of our change and of what we don't know has changed so much. And I still believe that we're still so very limited in what we know.
The last, sorry, Paul, the last like 2-3 episodes of the Nathan Jacob podcast has been all about Halloween topics. So it's like a random Q&A kind of stuff. But he also is talking to like exorcists and stuff to try to get in like an entry point to some of that stuff. I gotta go. I'm gonna leave. I'm streaming in an hour and a half as well. We've got Bible study today. So
yeah, sorry, I'm probably gonna wrap it up too. Alex, I feel like, do are you seeking a response to your thing, or were you do you feel like we dropped the ball on your comment?
No, that's whatever, this is you guys' thing. I'm the newest one here. I'm just you know what I mean? So whatever you think is best, if you want to comment, you can. It's just the thing that I've seen, because I've seen the world differently, as I already have gray hair. So as time goes by and think the things that I learned, I might read a book that I read 10 years ago and it's way different to me.
Yeah.
And it's not because the book changed, it's me that changed. But I still think like I'm very limited as far as the true sense of reality, like the reality of all realities. Now we have to bring in, God into the mix. But like I said, I think I still feel like I'm very limited into all that I know. And as far as the spiritual, and when people hear voices and prophetic dreams, all that
Yeah.
stuff is like, how do you try to make sense of some of that stuff?
Yeah, all that stuff's exciting though. The fact that we don't know everything, it's I think so. I'll wrap it up with some Peter Rollins, but I love Peter Rollins, and he talks about grace is the freedom from the libidinal pursuit of the lack, and the lack is the thing that promises to make you whole and complete. But really, being whole and complete is stasis. Like there's no being in that. There's no becoming. There's no transformation. There's no growth. It's sitting on clouds in the sky playing harps, but except there's no harps and there's no sitting. It's just absolute stasis. And so the fact that we don't know everything to me is good. It's an encouragement. It allows for wonder and awe and creativity and growth. And so, and I agree very much to your point. So this is a little bit of a plug for a combo that will come out on Randos United. I spoke with a wonderful gentleman the other day, Samuel, and it's going to come out on Randos United. Jeff's going to have it up sometime soon. And it's just a random conversation about a bunch of things, but something that he said in there which reminded me of what you said about reading a book and then having it be different years later when you reread it, is he just had this short little line where he said, text needs a context. And that's a really succinct way, I think, to say a lot. So anyhow, thanks everybody for coming. Thanks, Alex. Until next time, see y'all guys, and I'm gonna end the stream. Have a good day.